Baasha, king of Israel. In the third year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, son of. Oh, you know what? I'm reading prior to chapter 16. So let me go actually to chapter 16, which is starts off. Then the word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha. I lifted you up from the dust and made you leader of my people Israel. But you walked in the ways of Jeroboam and caused my people Israel to sin and to provoke me to anger by their sins. So I am about to consume Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like that of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Dogs will eat those belonging to Baasha who die in the city, and the birds of the air will feed on those who die in the country. As for the other events of Baasha's reign, what he did and his achievements, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Baasha rested with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and Elah, his son, succeeded him as king. So, where we're at now is that both David has passed and now Solomon has passed. And so now we're getting to the different kings of Israel and Judah. The kingdom has been split up due to the prophecy because of what David had did, and then how his sons did not keep the commandments or follow what the commandments and the holy word and the law. And so the kingdom now has been split up into Israel and Judah. And so one is 10 tribes and one is, well, 10-ish tribes. 10, I think it's 10 tribes, and the other is one tribe mainly, but also has some of another tribe in it. And so, and another thing is that we'll see that kings from both Israel and Judah will be compared to past kings. So if they followed and walked in the spirit and followed the Lord, then they were compared to David. And if they didn't, they were compared to Jeroboam, who led Israel astray. And so that's where we're currently at. And so it's going to start going quickly with these kings, because especially in Israel's case, because a lot of their kings didn't do what was right in the Lord's sight. And so let's go ahead and continue to read. Pick up where we just left off. Moreover, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, to Baasha in his house, because of all the evil he had done in the eyes of the Lord, provoking him to anger by the things he did, and becoming like the house of Jeroboam, and also because he destroyed it. So, one thing just came to my mind. So, a lot of these people, a lot of these generations weren't alive when, of course, Egypt came out, or I'm sorry, Israel came out of Egypt, and then they weren't alive when Israel entered into the promised land. They didn't see the how the Jordan had dried up. They didn't see a lot of the stuff that the miracles and wonders that the Lord had did with the previous generations. And then now you have where Israel requested king, and they finally were given one through Saul. And then David ends up becoming the king because Saul did not follow through always with the Lord's command. He was anointed. He did a lot of good things, but he a lot of times did things his way. And so a prophet told him that another person would rule, and that ended up being David. And so then David did a lot of good things, and really knows how to express gratitude and being humble and worshiping the Lord. And so David also committed a murder. And so, with the back in the previous Bible studies, so he could get Bathsheba, he killed Uriah. I think it's Uriah or something like that. His name, He sent him off to battle, in a place where he could be killed, and he was ends up being killed. And so thing so part of the prophecy was that because of what David had did, he would lose, or the kingdom would be torn from his line, but it wouldn't be during his reign. And then Solomon comes, and Solomon does a really good job. And however, Solomon doesn't. He ends up marrying a lot of women, and having a lot of concubines and being led astray. And so, but Solomon built the temple, so the Lord didn't split the kingdom during his reign, and it ended up being one of Solomon's sons that the kingdom got split up. And so now we're going back and forth between Israel and Judah, and that's how the Bible's going to be for the next several chapters, talking about the different kings of both Israel and Judah, and it's going to bounce back and forth. But one thing that came to my mind was how these generations afterwards, more and more generations, they started going back into ways that weren't good. They started sinning. They started worshiping other idols, doing detestable acts, and doing things that the inhabitants before them in the land, the Canaanites, did basically. And so more and more, more and more of the people are being led astray, and not worshiping the Lord compared to what it how it was originally. But they always had some instances where, even when they were being led out of Egypt, that not everybody followed the Lord correctly or wanted to. And so there was issues, but now we're seeing that it's becoming more and more. And so when it comes to how people react to things, and knowledge of history, and then keeping that knowledge of history, and learning from past mistakes. And instead of learning from past mistakes, people start to repeat those things, bringing past to present. Does that happen today? Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you have people, especially generation, that will go through something, and then eventually that generation gets more mature or dies off or what have you, and other generations come and they didn't see or go through the same situation. So then you start having people who doubt that those things even happened or existed. Some people who don't believe, or may think that there's some alternative or some option that somehow can be that there's no learning from prior history and prior experience, that it won't happen again. And so, do things like that happen today? Absolutely. And so we're in a position that we are able to see examples through the Holy Word, that not taking into account what has actually happened in history can cause issues to be repeated, right? And so I believe that even as a society today, that if we don't take into account what has happened and learn from the past, whether they be good things or bad things, mistakes or benefits, etc., and take those and continue to grow on those, if we don't do that and we become just not either complicit or not, ignoring the facts, ignoring history, then we can end up repeating, and it could be even worse because people may not have the same information and may not understand how to obtain the correct information or the correct answer when it was already provided. So there's a lot here, especially bringing past to present. What kind of thoughts or feelings come to your mind when we read over this? How does it make you feel, and what does it make you think?